Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Space News, the weekly show where we dive into the launches that occurred last week, launches slated to occur next week, Starship news, and other interesting space news. While there were not very many launches last week, we did see that all-impressive launch of Starship prototype SN11. Before we get started, I have to ask you to please subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos are published to ensure that the news is as up to date as possible. Today is Friday, April 2nd, and there is a lot to talk about. So let's get started.
3, 2, 1. Liftoff.
Let's of course start with the Starship news we have. On Monday the 29th, SpaceX was targeting a high-altitude flight test of Starship prototype SN11. For those unfamiliar, Starship is SpaceX's next-generation rocket aimed at taking the first humans to Mars. Monday's attempt was scrubbed, however, because an FAA inspector failed to make it to the site. This follows a new controversial rule by the FAA, which requires an FAA inspector to be present in person for these tests. In the inspector's defense, he was unaware of any flight attempts on Monday until late the night before. On Tuesday the 30th, SpaceX decided to screw the fog and launch at an early 8 a.m. local. Mixed emotions went around as the 15-story tall vehicle lifted off the pad because, you couldn't really see it. After Starship cleared the fog, however, SpaceX provided views from the rocket cameras. However, these views were very unreliable and often cut out. The vehicle successfully shut down one Raptor engine, and then a second. Finally, Starship shut down its third Raptor engine and completed its signature belly flop maneuver. This is where the vehicle reorients itself into horizontal flight. Controlled by its flaps, the vehicle free falls all the way down to the pad, where it lit at least one engine before we saw some rocket confetti rain down across the pad. SpaceX activated the FTS, or Flight Termination System. In other words, the rocket saw something crucially wrong and blew itself up on purpose. Elon Musk immediately went to Twitter, saying that one engine had issues on ascent and didn't reach operating chamber pressure during the landing burn. However, one engine not lighting isn't all that bad because, in theory, the vehicle could still land with only two engines. So, something else significant, possibly but not definitely linked to the engine, must have occurred. While we have received no more information about what happens or anything about this hop, we have received word that BN1, or Booster Number 1, which is the first full-scale prototype of the Super Heavy booster, will be scrapped. As a reminder, the Super Heavy booster is the first stage of the Starship launch vehicle. SpaceX apparently saw many things that they needed to improve upon in order to roll out a Super Heavy booster to the pad. So, BN2 is intended to roll out to the pad and possibly launch with around 2 Raptor engines to a very low altitude of very roughly 150 meters. With this all said, the next vehicle to roll out to the pad will actually be Starship SN15, which is the start of the next generation of Starship vehicles. This new generation holds thousands of hardware and software changes over the SN8 to SN11 generation. SN15 will also attempt a high-altitude flight test similar to all of SN8 to SN11's tests. So, let's head down to the build site and look at the progress of SN15 as well as the other prototypes. As you can see, SN15 is now in the high bay with its aft flap attached. Its nose cone structure is also fully stacked, so SN15 is just waiting for nose cone stacking. SN16 through SN19, which are all part of the SN15 generation, haven't made much progress over the last week. You can see SN20, which is the start of another new generation of Starships. This generation is intended to be orbital, with SN20 being the first Starship to go to orbit. BN1 is fully stacked in the high bay, but as we discussed, it will be scrapped fairly soon. If you like this graphic, go follow Brendan at Brendan_Lewis on Twitter. Whew, that was a lot of stuff. Okay, now over to the launches we saw last week. Unfortunately, there was only one launch last week. This launch was a Long March 4C rocket, which launched the Jiaopen 12 Earth Observation Satellite from the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center in Gansu Province, Northwest China, on March 30th at 22:45 UTC. Gaofen 12 is a microwave remote sensing satellite capable of providing photographs with a resolution of better than a meter. Gaofen 12 will be mainly used in land surveys, urban planning, determining and registering land rights, road network design, crop yield estimates, and disaster prevention and relief. Now over to the launches we hope to see over the next 7 days. The first launch is a Starlink mission, Starlink 23, which will launch from Slick 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida at about 1:34 p.m. Eastern on April 7th, atop a Falcon 9 rocket. This will be the 7th flight for this particular booster, and SpaceX of course will attempt to recover it 610 kilometers downrange on an autonomous drone ship that has not been announced yet. They will also be attempting to recover the fairing halves from the water about 707 kilometers downrange by the Shalaya Borderland ship. The second and final launch is a very exciting launch, as it is a crewed launch. A Russian Soyuz 2.1A launch vehicle will launch the crewed Soyuz MS-18 spacecraft to the International Space Station with members of the next expedition crew. This will occur at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan at a gruesome 3:42 a.m. Eastern Time or 7:42 a.m. UTC. Godspeed. And that's it. I mean, there are some other things, but whatever. Okay, fine. The Virgin Galactic announced a new plane, and Inspiration 4 crew has been announced. That's it. Thank you all so much for watching. It means so much to me, and I really do thank you. If you enjoyed it, I have to ask you to subscribe and comment down below if you feel like it. And I will see you next week.